All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webcast, From Now to Next, Cloud Technology and Nonprofits, featuring Neil Jensen and Scott Schmidt of Aperio. This presentation will focus on what it means to be in the cloud and how to identify which cloud solutions may be best for your nonprofit. The Cornerstone On Demand Foundation is excited to sponsor this presentation, and we thank you for attending. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. To reduce background noise, all lines have been muted. Please note that there is a chat box in the middle right-hand side of your screen. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time, as we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Today's session and the associated slides will be posted to the Cornerstone On Demand Foundation's Nonprofit Ready Learning Portal within 48 hours. You will receive a follow-up email with a link to these archives and information about the next webinar in this series. Please feel free to share this presentation with your coworkers and friends. Now, before I hand it over to our presenter, I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce myself and the Cornerstone On Demand Foundation as the host of this presentation. My name is Justin Waddell, and I work with the Nonprofit Empowerment Program of the Foundation, which was launched in 2009 in an effort to provide learning and talent management technology and pro bono HR consulting services to the nonprofit sector, both domestically and abroad. Today's webinar, From Now to Next, Cloud Technology and Nonprofits, is part of an ongoing nonprofit webinar series designed to provide expertise and best practices related to talent management for nonprofit leaders. This webinar series is an extension of the HR Pro Bono Corps, a Cornerstone On Demand Foundation initiative in which HR-related coaching and consulting to nonprofit organizations is made available at no cost. The HR Pro Bono Corps focuses its support in three areas: performance management, learning management, and succession management. If you are interested in learning more about how your organization can benefit from the services provided through the HR Pro Bono Corps, please visit our website at cornerstoneondemand.org. And now, I'd like to introduce today's presenters, Neil Jensen and Scott Schmidt. Neil and Scott, thank you again for sharing your expertise today. I'll now pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I know I speak for myself and Scott when I say I'm very excited to talk on this very important topic, really about cloud technology. Before we dig into the topic at hand, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the organization that both Scott and I represent. We work for a company called Aperio. Aperio is a cloud leader. We are cloud pioneers. We were founded about 8 years ago. We've got 1,000 people. We've supported over 600 different enterprises and moved over 3.2 million people to the cloud. We focus on multi-tenant cloud solutions, and we work with organizations like Workday, Salesforce, obviously Cornerstone On Demand, and Google. And we really work to help organizations set strategies, deploy those strategies, and then extend those strategies over time in order to deliver value to the business. We do this in three different ways. First, we'll focus on working with organizations to set a strategy and really design a solution for their organization. We do this through things like building a vision and a roadmap, helping organizations focus on their service delivery model, redesigning business processes, charting the course for change management, et cetera. Next, what we will do is really help an organization dig into the technology at hand to deploy that to the organization. We'll do system design and configuration. We'll do knowledge transfer to help that organization really stand up and own that technology post-go-live. We'll do data migration, systems integrations, really deployment-related tasks. Post-go-live, we'll really organize to help organizations really look at extending the value of what they've invested in, really measuring engagement, really defining, designing, and deploying custom reports and analytics, providing ongoing advisory services, and really helping organizations figure out how best to consume cloud technology that's usually being updated a couple of times a year. Again, really focusing on a very soup to nuts path of helping an organization, start with defining their strategy, second, deploying technologies, and then third, really, extending the value of their investment over time. This is a quick slide with some of the organizations in the not-for-profit space that we've worked with. There's a lot of great user stories that come out of this. We've done Workday work, Cornerstone work, Salesforce work, Google work with a number of the organizations that you see represented on screen. And again, really helping them make that leap from on-premise technologies to flexible, agile, adaptable cloud technologies. So what are we here to do today? In this session, we're going to cover a couple of important things and help the group here really get at the answer to the question in the box. So what exactly does it mean to be in the cloud? We're going to do that through a couple of different channels. First, we're going to address some common concerns and facts about the cloud. We're going to talk a lot about the types of technologies that are moving to the cloud. We're going to talk about why this is important for nonprofit organizations. How is it beneficial? How can it help you deliver value? And then we'll close out the session really talking about some of the key success criteria that will help you deliver results in the cloud. What are some of those important things that you'll need to do in order to unleash the value and really find success? Our agenda for today is as follows. We'll talk a little bit about, I think, the worlds that you all are living in today, so that, what it's like to be in a nonprofit organization. We'll really talk about a definition of cloud technology, really dig into some common concerns. So, a lot of the things that first come to mind when organizations really look at making the leap to the cloud. We'll talk about why this works for nonprofits. We'll talk about how to get it right. And then we'll close out our session with a couple of quick case studies on cloud technology and do some Q&A and wrap the session. I'm going to turn it over to Scott at this point and let him dig in and talk a little bit about the nonprofit world today. Scott, you're up.
Great. Thank you, Neil. And, probably no surprise to all of you on the line, I think. One of the things that we have learned and we've seen just continuing to work in the nonprofit space is just how competitive your environment is. So not just competing amongst the nonprofit world, but increasingly the organizations that we work with are competing against the for-profit space as well, really becoming more important to recruit talent, to engage the right people, to have the right systems in place, because the demands on the nonprofit world are also increasing. I was speaking to the CEO of a humanitarian organization last week, and one of the challenges that he raised was that the gap between humanitarian need and humanitarian sort of vision and delivery is growing. And I think that's true in all of the nonprofit spaces, that there are just always, there's more need for your services than I think there are sometimes resources to supply, and it's becoming a significant pressure. Also looking, as all of your challenges, I would venture to guess, are becoming bigger and more complex. The issues have longer durations and longer timetables to solve. And as kind of this perfect storm circles, many of the old ways of doing things or the old systems or the old processes are becoming more and more strained. So I think one of the realities, and I'll probably say this a few times as we go through the deck, but if you have never worked in the nonprofit space, I think the realities of funding and fundraising and having a share of unrestricted funds in order to supply your back office, and I mean all of those issues that aren't a challenge or are potentially not as much of a challenge in the for-profit world, obviously again just put increasing pressure on the nonprofit space to kind of get the most bang for your buck, as well as to continue to innovate and continue to compete in a much more cost-constrained environment. And so while that is true, the workplace is changing. And as I said, the types of organizations that you're competing against are changing. I think there will always be a population that wants to work for a nonprofit and and accept some trade-offs for that. But I think that's not the vision that we want moving forward. And I think another organization I worked with said, we really are trying to move from systems so we're not so reliant on heroes, and continuing to build capacity, because as you look at where the world is going, and as you look at where organizations are going, it really is a changing environment. And I know when you look at the technologies that are available and how people use technology in their daily life, and just the millennials and the younger generations coming up in the workforce, there's a very different expectation for what they will be able to do and what's available to them. So as you look at the changing workplace, and when you look at just the trends, I mean, having employees expect these systems, and having employees expect a way to make changes themselves or look up information themselves. A big push that we're seeing in our clients is, again, cloud and mobile systems. So this idea that everyone has a smartphone, and those of you on the line that work internationally, even internationally, everyone has a smartphone. That ability to be reached or to access information everywhere, and then really global talent. So moving away from a U.S.-centric approach, a European-centric approach, to really taking a global view on processes and a global view on recruiting and a global view on the talent that we need. All of this is again, really just changing how organizations need to look at the people that they're trying to manage and look at the service they're delivering. And it's not to say, all of these things, I think many of the organizations we work with in all spaces, so not just the nonprofit space, are struggling to deal with this. So it's not that there's been a groundswell and the world has changed, but being at the forefront, or at least being at the median of this change, I think is critical as organizations continue to compete for talent and continue to expand and really push their mission.
Hey, Scott, are you seeing companies that you're working with in the nonprofit space really respond to those consumer-grade expectations, focus on, catering to digital natives, going cloud, going mobile, and thinking global? Are you seeing this, as something those organizations are embracing?
So Neil, it's interesting. I think that there's a clear divide in the organizations that I've worked with today, and those of you on the line, I'd be interested if you chat your comments or questions. I found that it really depends on the staffing model of the organization. That when you look at organizations that rely on college grads or on recruiting fresh crops to fill the ranks every 1, 2, 3 years, I think they have had to push much more into these areas just because of the nature of the demographics of their recruiting. But I'm also seeing organizations that have less turnover, longer tenure, more stable, potentially older workforces also move in this direction, because they're realizing that there's value in these tools and there's value that's not being realized. So I think it is still very much potentially a demographic divide right now, but I see it more and more. One is the workforce as more younger workers come into the workforce, but also as the power of these tools is better understood.
Perfect. Let's talk a little bit, Scott. Tell me your definition of cloud technology.
Well, so I think this is a question that I think always comes up, and I'm sure some of you on the line have. The term cloud gets thrown around a lot. And the idea of cloud technologies, I mean, you read comic strips about it, you see articles about it, and it's sometimes hard to cut through, what is marketing and what is hype, and really get kind of a clear definition of the cloud. This is the definition that we use at Aperio. Obviously, Glenn is our Chief Technology Officer, and I think cloud technology, to me, getting away from the definition, the key criteria, or where I'll focus are the key criteria. A true cloud solution is going to be hosted. So what hosted means is that the vendor is taking care of the servers, the vendor is taking care of the maintenance. You don't have to house the actual infrastructure to run this software. And I think that is and continues to be a big switch for organizations that are used to, coming in and, purchasing software, installing it on their servers, and having however many IT folks that keep the system running. So to truly be cloud, I think hosting, that the software is hosted and you can eliminate some of that overhead, I mean, that's a critical criteria for me. And the second one here is multi-tenancy. So this is where I think there is the most misinformation out in the market around what truly makes a cloud solution. And
this is where the delta is between the marketing and the truth, if you will. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So I think, plenty of vendors have begun to offer hosted solutions. And I think that is becoming more common. You're seeing that. Where a true cloud solution and where a lot of the value is going to be driven for your organization is in this concept of multi-tenancy. And so what multi-tenancy means is that all of the users of this software are using the same software. They're on the same code set, they have the same functionality, and that they get updates regularly as the vendor updates. So no longer having this, that you are 3 versions behind and your software is about to be unsupported and you have to go through an upgrade cycle. Or multi-tenancy truly means you're up to date and the vendor keeps you up to date, and all of their clients are on the same version. The benefit of that to you as a client is they can focus all of their resources on a single software solution and continue to make it better. They don't have to split their developers and have a third of them supporting older versions that some of their clients still are on, a couple that are looking at current development or future development. It really allows the vendors to focus their resources on the single set, roll out additional functionality and new functionality at a much faster clip than certainly in the non-cloud world and in in what we call the single tenant model, which is just sort of hosted software code, but where clients are not all on the same version of the software.
So some of the hype that you're referring to, Scott, in the marketing realm, if you will, I mean, I've heard terms like, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. How do you characterize some of those phrases against the multi-tenancy comment?
So some of that I think is, truly pure marketing hype. When you get into, and I think this is one of the problems in the industry, and this is where I think there is so much confusion. As you get into some of these areas, there is no standard definition. So to me, when you get into that single cloud or private cloud, I mean, that is, as I've seen it in some cases, that's smokescreen for the fact that yes, the vendor is hosting your software, but they're hosting your software. It still is your own line of code. It still will be subject to the same upgrades, the same same obsolescence cycles of if you don't upgrade. That it's a shift of resources, which is, you know, a step in the right direction, but is still not getting you the benefits of multi-tenancy, especially as we'll talk about in the next few slides in the nonprofit world, where I think, you know, cloud multi-tenancy is even more critical in sort of, again, the nonprofit cost-constrained environment than it is in other businesses.
We're going to do a quick poll question here. So for the audience on the line, you should see in your right-hand nav panel the poll question. And Scott and I are very curious and learn from the group on the phone, you know, what your biggest concerns are in moving to the cloud. Is it data security? Is it cost? Is it expertise and complexity, control and customization? So please pick an answer and submit, and we will see the results here in just a second. Scott, what do you? What's your bet here? Where do you think people are going to land?
You know, I tend to think it is it's either cost or it's control and customization. Those would be my two. I think people are becoming more and more comfortable with data security in the cloud as we all use, you know, Google Mail or different apps. I think cost is always an issue, and not just cloud software, but control and customization. I think sometimes this is difficult for organizations to get over as well. That, you know, one of the trade-offs in that multi-tenancy model that I discussed is that you can't sit down and change the code or customize fully to meet your exact business processes. And I think the cloud vendors are they're configurable and have, you know, thousands of different configuration options. But it is a different hurdle for organizations that maybe aren't used to changing their processes, and instead want to just, you know, take the software that's given and overhaul to really show, you know, their exact process within through customization.
I think you're spot on. I think we're going to see number 4 be the far away winner here, and I am just waiting for the results to pop up here, and we should be able to get a feel from the group on where their biggest concerns are. Scott, are you seeing results on your side?
Not yet.
Not yet. It's churning. The poll takers are busy tabulating results as we go.
Well,
let's come back to that. We'll jump back to that.
This is Justin. I can share out. I'm not sure why it's not sharing right now. Our leaders are actually right now cost and then expertise and complexity, with control and customization as a close second.
All right. Data security is in 4th place.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, Scott, let's talk a little bit about some of these common concerns, and we can dig in on why the answers are the answers.
Yeah, that actually is very interesting. You know, so I guess going through starting with the survey results. So as I mentioned, I think cost is always a concern. And again, not just cloud technologies, not just HR, not just technology. I mean, cost is a reality of the environments that we all work in today. Where I think some of the benefits are, as we look at cost, and, you know, as you think about cost, sometimes it's difficult for organizations to wrap their head around the new cloud model as well. So, you know, cloud software is priced as a subscription model. So it is not one where, you know, you write a giant check to the organization and they, again, turn over the software code and you load it on your servers, and you know, you own it and pay some level of maintenance for every year, but you essentially own the software. one of the advantages, but one of the things that is sometimes difficult in those initial moves to the cloud is that cloud pricing is subscription-based. So on the plus side, it's predictable, and you know what your costs are going to be every year. You don't typically have this huge upfront cost that has been the kind of trademark of legacy software deployments. But going to that subscription cost, I think organizations struggle with sometimes. And I have also found that organizations sometimes discount the hidden costs of their big software deployments. As we get into the actual costs associated with maintaining the servers or maintaining legacy systems, all of the people that do that and all of the kind of heartache that's involved in keeping those systems up and active becomes very difficult to cost out. So sometimes when you look at the cost of a cloud technology versus what people are claiming is the cost of the current technologies, it doesn't stack up. But I found you really have to dig into those numbers and do a little more digging, a little more justification. And then, complexity. I think, Neil, you're going to talk towards the second half of the presentation, really speaking to how you deploy cloud solutions effectively. But I'll steal a little bit of your thunder on this. But I think complexity is something to consider. And I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think cloud solutions are more complex. I think it is, again, a different way of thinking that makes people uncomfortable the first few times that you do it. So just the idea from moving to a non-customizable solution that is configurable gives people some heartache sometimes. And I think this is a discipline that all organizations need to get better at. I think cloud technologies give you an opportunity to revisit your business processes and to really look at what you're doing and if it makes sense, and then having a discussion of how to translate what you're trying to do or what your business goals are into the cloud or into the configuration of the solution that you're looking for. And I think that again is a new process. It's different than taking your current processes and customizing or just upgrading the system from one version to another. But I think it's not as daunting as it may sometimes appear. And then
let's dig in a little bit more here. Why don't we talk a little bit about some of the ways in which we can benefit from this?
Okay. Yeah, excellent transition. So again, first, I think the biggest one to me is the first couple bullets of having that subscription-based pricing model and eliminating some of those total costs, the overhead costs of really having to do the server maintenance and having programmers and developers. I mean, this to me is one of the real benefits of moving to a cloud technology for a nonprofit. I think it becomes somewhat easier to budget because you have predictable costs. So you know what amount of your unrestricted funds will need to be spent on these systems every year, and you won't get hit with an upgrade. You won't get hit with a charge because the software is no longer being supported and you need to move to something different. It really allows for predictable costs across the board, which in my mind is a huge advantage in kind of knowing the uncertainty of fundraising and of budgets in the nonprofit world. I think that to me is huge. The other piece here is going back to the cloud concept and the multi-tenancy concept is moving to a cloud technology allows organizations to stay on the most current version. So, you know, I would venture a guess that all of you on the line suffer from this in at least one area. But what we found is, you know, nonprofits especially have gone out. There was funding one year to purchase a software system. It was installed and has been running ever since. And, you know, many of the organizations that I work with have these legacy systems that are 5 and 10 years old in some cases that have just never been touched since the initial deployment, and continue every year, get a little more out of date, get a little more difficult to work within the business, aren't as flexible as what you need in a changing work environment or in a changing business. So the idea that these cloud solutions will keep you on the latest version, that these cloud solutions will push out new technology, and you'll never have to worry about, you know, kind of being obsolete, or that is the other huge advantage. So it becomes, there is not these massive upgrade cycles, these not multi-year upgrade processes. You get your 2 to 3 releases a year. You test the new functionality and you have it. It's a lot less painful to do it that way, and you never have to worry about, again, just being out of date because of the cloud technology. And then, you know, the third, I guess, biggest thing to me in the nonprofit world is just, you know, the people constraints. So I think all organizations have some level of staffing constraint. I think it's much more acute in many of the nonprofits that I've worked with. So, you know, keeping your back office or keeping your overhead costs down is so critical, and cloud solutions is a way to do that. So, you know, you really get to have less staff that's required to just kind of keep systems up and running and maintained, and you actually can focus the staff that you do have on more value-add activities. So they're, you know, supporting the system, supporting the users of the system. They're looking at what new functionality can benefit the organization. You know, I've found that these cloud solutions, there's a lot less need for people just keeping the lights on, and it allows the staff that you do have to really be a lot more value add. And again, it just keeps down that IT overhead of things like servers and you know, other things that were necessary previously, but you know, slowly are becoming less and less important.
Scott, let's transition here. I want to learn from you, just based on your experience, what's moving to the cloud in these types of organizations?
And you know, I think this is one of the big opportunities, and one of the areas that we're seeing all sorts of areas that are moving and transitioning. So obviously, you know, I focused a little bit on the human resources space. So we are seeing these HR technologies shift to the cloud-based models, but also seeing other areas. I mean, so when you get into a marketing function and you start looking at, you know, how do you track your donor lists and how do you communicate with potential donors and how do you manage your invites or your events, you know, I think we're seeing much more willingness to move to the cloud in some of those areas. Starting to see organizations that really are pushing, you know, financial solutions, payroll solutions moving to the cloud, you know, marketing in particular, you know, the smart tracking. So, you know, I think we're seeing more nonprofits that are getting sophisticated about some of these areas and making, you know, making investments in marketing and fundraising to have better targeted communications and better tracking and leveraging cloud technologies for that. I'm also seeing a push to the second to last bullet point here of communications and collaboration. So I think that within organizations today, or I guess historically within organizations, internal communications has always been something of a struggle. And internal Knowledge management is something of a struggle. You know, how do you keep your staff informed? How do you make sure that they have the latest information? How do you disseminate documents or critical alerts? This is an area that we're really seeing a push for in nonprofits that I think has been exciting. So leveraging technologies internally that let different groups within the organization or different users in the organization really collaborate, really access the same information, have some areas or have more formal paths of communication and updating. I think this is a big push, and is actually an area where I've seen some nonprofits really outstripping what the for-profit realm is doing, just because of the need for agility and the need for knowledge sharing. You can't, in the nonprofit world, you can't afford sloppy execution, and I think people are really embracing some of these new tools that allow them to communicate and allow them to track and work collaboratively together in a way that's pretty exciting.
We've actually had a Q&A, Scott, come in, and one of our attendees has offered up, also the thought of even just kind of a staple of the day-to-day, but, shifting to more of a virtual desktop environment, and even taking something like a contracts tool and having that be a cloud-based app. So, I think we're seeing it, to your points, really across the entire organization, really finding those opportunities, and then, a lot of the things you mentioned up front, that are things that really make, a non-for-profit tick and really, help them, not only leverage their volunteer base, their donor base, their employee base, but really kind of run the organization soup to nuts. So lots and lots of opportunities out there to shift to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott, I think it's time to transition a little bit here. I know we've spent a lot of time, talking about the cloud, what it is, what it means, what's moving. I think the group on the line probably wants to hear, how do you get this right? So if you do, select the cloud technology and you're going to deploy it, how do you get it right? Before we dig into that topic, I'd love to learn from the group on the phone their thoughts on, how they best prepare. So do you, build a solid governance model? Do you redesign processes? Do you plan for change? All of the above. Really curious in what folks think of the way that they plan for this. So again, Scott, I'm going to put you on the spot here and try and get a sense of what you think they'll say.
I think we're leading the witness a little bit with this question. I almost wish we had also included a none of the above, because I think this is, all of the, I'm going to give my answer. I think all of these are especially critical in a technology deployment, but I also think that these are, three areas that organizations tend to, and this is not nonprofit specific, this is organizations, tend to, give the short end of the stick in some of these areas of, setting up governance or taking the opportunity to redesign processes or, change management in some organizations I've worked with is a dirty word, but is so critical to the long-term success. So, to me, I think all of these are important, but I'd also be curious, for those of you using the chat window or the Q&A, how are your organizations at these things, and, what is the appetite for some of this as you look at technology deployments?
We've got a comment in the Q&A really talking about governance being the most important thing and how it's a dirty word for some organizations. We'll tackle that here in a minute as we dive into how to get this right. Justin, our fearless moderator behind the scenes, do we have results that you can see?
Yes, we do. Currently tied on the leaderboard is both plan for change management and all of the above, with build a governance model coming in a distant second. However, redesign processes garnered no votes whatsoever.
Interesting. Okay, so based on the all of the above, I think some people are thinking of the trifecta as the answer, with some folks really leaning towards the change. So we will give some consideration to redesigning processes just based on that all of the above answer, but we'll dig in on some of these. So Scott, to your point about leading the witness, the question was a little bit sheepish. And, you know, for the group on the phone, you know, as Aperio works with organizations to deploy cloud technologies of many forms, we really have a prescription for how it works best. And in the next couple of minutes, we'll talk about, you know, setting your vision, defining, you know, your workforce, customer, donor experience. We'll talk about governance and what to do with that and how to make that work. We'll talk about future state process, a category I like to call the overlooked, and then lastly, change management. So let's dig in here. With every deployment that we take on, you know, regardless of the type of cloud technology that we're working with, we're going to work with our client to develop something we call a vision map. And the vision map really includes a couple of key components. So the first thing is defining your overall purpose statement. What is it you're trying to accomplish? If you were to you know, have to offer up your elevator speech in one quick statement, what would it be? You know, what is that purpose of why you're deploying that technology? The second component of the vision map is really talking about your guiding principles. What are those 3 to 5, you know, principles that you are going to adhere to make sure that you fulfill your purpose? You know, is it being consumer grade? Is it being simple? Is it being easy? Is it, you know, being accurate or timely? Really defining those words will help you test your decisions as you're making decisions throughout your process. The vision map also includes 2 other key things that really help an organization stay on track as they're working through their deployment. Key attributes are some descriptive statements that really describe those guiding principles. And then measures are really those things that you're going to lock onto and track against to make sure that you are actually achieving the results you're looking for. So again, starting out that process with a clear vision and really saying it out loud and getting people wrapped around that message is definitely one thing we find critical to your success. As we look at, you know, moving forward, it's also about defining the experience. So as we look at organizations that are, you know, investing in cloud technologies and, you know, really looking at deploying that for a specific purpose, I've always found that as you know, aim at a target, if you can clearly define what you want the experience to be for a volunteer, for a donor, for the community, for a people manager, and say very definitively how you want them to interact with that technology, you're much more prone to make decisions along the way that are going to enable that group to actually fulfill that experience, right? If I say, I want to give my people managers access to data and information and also give them the power to do something about it, I'm much more apt to make that come true as I'm making decisions throughout my deployment. Scott, what do you think from the donor piece? I mean, how would you shape that experience when you're looking at a donor?
Well, you know, I think this is it varies across organizations, obviously, but you know, I think donors in particular, in most of the organizations that I've worked with, get handled with, you know, a little bit of kid gloves, rightly. So that when we start talking about the kind of the mobile or the consumer grade or the tailored experience, I think donors especially is where where I see a lot more focus within organizations of, making sure that the messaging and communications is crisp, making sure that the tracking is crisp. So, you know who your donors are, some of their preferences, what they've donated, you have, an easy kind of reference guide to maintain that, and making sure that all of that interaction is smooth. And Neil, it's going to blur into your next slide here, but I think defining the experience, to me, this is an area that many organizations kind of shortchange, and I think I've seen it go to either end of the spectrum here. That sometimes organizations, and in nonprofits in some cases are more guilty of this than the environments I've worked, tend to not want to be disruptive and tend to undershoot potentially what they could be doing with some of these technology deployments or with the solutions that are being deployed, because they don't want to disrupt the workforce, they're worried about the change management concerns, and sometimes you don't achieve the goals of what you were trying to do because you were so nervous about some of those external factors that can be managed. So I think it's important to really define the experience so you know why you're doing this, to Neil's point about vision. You know why you're doing this, and you also know what you're trying to deliver. And make sure that as you're making decisions, you're actually delivering on it. And then the flip side of that coin is I've also worked with organizations that fall into that kid in a candy store trap of just because these cloud tools deliver a lot of functionality and can sort of do a lot of stuff, that doesn't mean that you have to roll all of that out. So, getting into understanding, what you want the experience to be versus, what it could be, and managing your own expectations and managing your own scope a little bit. I think defining these experiences and setting the vision up front is really critical for kind of staying the path as you go through the deployment.
Yeah, I look at the guiding principles concept that we, just talked about in the vision map, and I think of, defining that experience. Simple, easy to use are often words that we see pop up as guiding principles. And to your kid gloves comment, just making something simple, right? So if I have a contribution page attached to my website, and I want a large community of donors to, make a contribution, like that process should be really simple, right? Let's not burden people with, difficult steps when we're asking them to, fund our cause and support, what it is we're trying to make a difference for in the world. So good comment, Scott. I love where you're going and some of the experiences you're drawing out.
Yeah, and Neil, we got a great comment in the box that, that the donor experience is critical, but the employee experience often is not communicated as much or gets shortchanged. I think that's absolutely true. But one of the kind of hidden things about these technologies, or where I think where these technologies are going, is the employee experience probably shouldn't be that much different than what you would show to a donor or what you would show to one of your executives or show to a manager. I think we're converging on everyone has the same expectations, and in some of these solutions, or in many of these solutions, because you configure your donor experience one way or your executive experience one way, some of that bleeds over to how employees should be using the system and what their experience should be. But I do think it is critical. I think is a good acknowledgement that employees do sometimes get shortchanged on this and need to be part of that conversation as well.
Yeah, I like that comment. It's a great comment. I'm going to push on here. We've had some comment about governance being a dirty word and critical. As we work with organizations to deploy cloud technologies, our focus is really on just enough governance to make sure that we make good decisions. And typically in a cloud environment, you're moving fast, right? And you're working through iterative cycles not necessarily a waterfall approach. You might be working in an agile, development model or a hybrid, waterfall that has some agile cycles built in. What we want to do is we want to empower, the project team that's on the ground to make as many decisions as possible, and really escalate to, a steering committee or a stakeholder team as necessary to drive, bigger bucket decisions, and then really only taking things to the executive committee that are gonna have a mass impact, on the organization. This type of model holds true, for large enterprise clients as well. But as I found with not-for-profits, the more we can be nimble and agile, and keep as many decisions at the project team level as possible, better, and really bring things up the chain to maybe the executive group running the organization, or potentially the board, as we see critical items hit the radar. Scott, do you have anything more to kind of throw in on that governance topic?
No, I mean, I think you hit it, but just again, this is an area that I think organizations don't like talking about, but is critical to, after you spend the time defining the vision and what you're trying to deliver, making sure that you don't lose sight of that, and that you have the right support and decision making to continue to work towards the goals you defined.
Yeah, I like it. The next topic we want to cover really is, defining future state process. I've worked with a lot of organizations over time, large enterprise, small and medium enterprise, nonprofit, that go through a step of really arduously documenting the process that they have today. And it may include legacy technology, it may include, steps. And I think it's somewhat of a valuable exercise to have, an understanding of what you're doing today. But I really think it's overkill to arduously document it. As you look at cloud technology and the opportunity that it really provides you that critical moment to really redefine your future state process. One, to operate best within the cloud technology you've purchased, and two, to really shake up why you're doing what you're doing. I've seen organizations kind of take a lift and shift approach with cloud-based technology, where they literally copy business process from old system to new, and they miss a big opportunity to achieve new value, right? So I think it's important, one, when you're looking at a new technology, first really understand what makes it tick. How does it operate? What's different about it? How is the data model different? How are things like workflow different? Really take that first step to truly understand that stuff, understand those capabilities of the technology, and then two, really critically focus your group on redefining your business processes in a way that are going to help you achieve your guiding principles, achieve the experience that you've defined for those critical user groups, and really deliver new business value that you couldn't in your own technology. Scott, in the interest of time, I'm going to keep pushing on here. As I look at the topic of what I call the often overlooked, there's a lot of things that could get lost in the shuffle in cloud technology if you're not careful. And really having a plan, before you start configuring on, understanding your integrations, understanding, what the data conversion process is going to look like, understanding how you're going to test the system. All those things are critical to have a perspective on before you hit that critical juncture in the project where your vendor is going to tell you, okay, time to test. This holds true for things like workflow. It also holds true for, kind of a post-go live scenario, which is, once the system's live, how are you going to support it? Not only from a, administrative perspective, but when donors have questions, where are they going to go? How are they going to get support? When employees have questions, where are they going to go? How are they going to get support? Really framing those things before you get moving is going to help you as you make decisions along the way to ensure that you've kind of thought out your full operation before you're at those critical junctures in your project where you need to make those decisions. Scott, anything I'm missing as you think of the nonprofit world that you want to call out here?
No, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, and these challenges aren't unique really in nonprofit. I think these are things that get overlooked all the time and should be thought about prior to launching your deployment, because if you haven't talked about them but before you start, deployments are frequently too big to get to some of these, and you end up you end up backing into decisions or making decisions that you might not have made if you had given yourself a little more time or a little more deliberation.
Right, some of that runway is important to get some of that stuff right. Excellent comment. The last item up for bid is really to manage the change. As we look at cloud-based technology, it's really going to hit your user base in a new and different way. If we look at the human capital space as an example, human capital systems that organizations are on today were probably, designed in the 70s and 80s, and those systems were really aimed at, helping the HR department be better, right? Empowering the HR professional with some online capability. The systems that are being designed today, the cloud-based systems, are really being designed for the manager. So making a big shift from, a system that was designed for the HR group and then designed, for the end user requires us to manage that change. We need to not only help our, employee base and our people managers understand, the context for what they're, being given access to, but also help them really navigate that world and understand their role and responsibility in the process, right? This holds true, across numerous other, elements of the organization, whether it be a contracting system that was mentioned before, or a virtual desktop, or, a collaboration system. Really taking that time to thoughtfully, one, introduce the solution, but two, really people, help your, your constituent base understand the context around it, again, is going to be really critical as we go. In the interest of time, Scott and I have gotten a little long in the tooth, talking about, some of the challenges and how you can address it and get it right. I'm going to skip some of the case studies for now because I really do want to open it up to the group for Q&A. Justin, our fearless moderator behind the scenes, I know you've got a couple of questions that have come in that you wanted to make sure that got addressed here in the last few minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And as a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions from the session thus far, please submit them through the chat function in the middle right-hand side of your screen. We have had a couple that have come in already. The first, and either of you feel free to answer, have you seen much resistance to investing in cloud technology? And if so, what's the best way you found to make that business case?
Scott, I think you are best positioned to tackle that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think of course we've seen resistance, and I think the best way to me is to overcome it is through education in a lot of cases. So I mentioned earlier educating about the funding models and how these systems and how the subscription-based model is different and some of the savings there. I think being able to see some of the systems in many cases is a huge benefit. So when you look at what's being leveraged in organizations today compared to what some of these cloud solutions can do, I mean, I've seen jaws drop in rooms as you let some of the users or your management see what's possible when you're not trying to run and kind of Band-Aid systems that are 10 years old. So I think it really is that just making sure that they're exposed, that they're educated, and that you're having some of these early conversations, you know, is the best way to get people comfortable with the concept and continue to move in this direction.
Awesome. Thank you. I love this next question. How big does our project team need to be if we want to deploy these types of technology in our nonprofit?
You know, Neil, I'll let you chime in, but I'll start. I think this is another area that maybe I neglected in some of the slides. But I think an advantage of cloud technology in general is it doesn't require the giant teams that have been used in past software deployments. So I think probably many of you have been involved in these deployments where, you know, you had a team of 15 people and the consulting organization or the vendor came in with another team of, you know, 20 people that was full-time, and it took a year or it took 18 months, and, you know, it was just this huge effort. I mean, we're seeing cloud deployments that can be leveraged with, I mean, internal teams from the organization with, I mean, 5 people, 6 people, 7 people, you know, working somewhat dedicated, but also still doing their day job. And, you know, the typical cloud deployment is a much shorter timeline than the system deployments of the past. And then, you know, it wasn't in the question, but in the staffing model for organizations helping you for the third parties is different as well. I mean, I think our CEO put out a blog post about this, but there is if you're deploying cloud technology, the vendors should not be coming to you with teams of 20 or 20 people that need to be full-time for a year. I mean, the model is fundamentally different for staffing, and I think is another area of kind of savings and efficiency and, you know, quicker time to value.
I agree with you, Scott. What I would offer up in there as well is it's a much more functionally based project team and less technical. That's not to mean that there aren't technical skills required, but we see, you know, more functional users making configuration decisions versus writing requirements and, you know, passing them off to technical resources to, you know, code customizations. So that's one key change that I see popping up in you know, how the team is shaped. And then lastly, if you're going to be successful, you know, I would include some end users in your project team, maybe as an advisory group to the project team, making sure that as you're making those configuration decisions and you're focusing on things like change management, you've got people that are kind of going to be at the receiving point of this, really helping you navigate and make sure, you know, you get it right. I know we're just about out of time. Just as a quick thank you to the group out there, I want to mention Jack Rotundi by name. He's been really active in our Q&A. I really appreciate that. If any of you have an interest in reaching out to Scott or myself after the webinar, I've listed our contact information on the page you see. And you can also follow us on Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter at Neil A. Jensen or at Scott_Schmidt and follow some of our musings as we talk about our experiences in the space. With that said, I want to thank everybody for attending today, and we've really enjoyed your interaction, and have a great day. Bye for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Neil and Scott. And as a reminder to everyone on the line, today's slides and a recording of this webinar will be posted on the Foundation's Nonprofit Ready Learning Portal within 48 hours. For those of you who are not familiar with Nonprofit Ready, it is the Cornerstone On Demand Foundation's no-cost professional development portal for nonprofits. So in addition to housing all of the Foundation's webinars, such as this one, it also contains over 200 learning resources designed to help advance your nonprofit career and increase your impact. We'll be sending all participants a follow-up email with a link to this location shortly. And again, Neil, Scott, that was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I can't thank you enough. And a big shout out to those in the audience who did really participate. We couldn't have done it without you. Again, fantastic presentation, definitely impressive. Thanks again, Neil. Thanks again, Scott. And thank you again for everyone to attend today. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.